What's up, everybody? How you doing? And welcome to the Rideshare Rodeo, episode number 447. Today, going to be a little bit interactive. Um, and then the audio podcast listeners who have been with us for, hell, some of you guys, since the beginning or since early on in those 447 episodes, going to be doing the audio podcast over on Podbean again. So check it out. We'll probably go live on Tuesdays or Mondays. I'm trying to figure that out right now because it's always been the Tuesday drop. But stick with me, and we will see how this plays out. I am also testing something on the stream today. So if you guys are catching this on live stream, please leave comments, and I will try to get to them in between things because it's more of a video test. And then there's a new area that I'm going to be set up in to record video. And I think that this quality video will be better, even if at the moment it's not kicking for you. It should be here in the soon near future. We're going to talk taxes on tips. We're going to talk Uber and Open Table. We're going to talk Nevada giving Uber basically a follow-up prize for losing so badly on a court case they should have lost on. Doordash and Uber in California with the monster-sized lawsuit. No, it's not the one that is allowing the 7th District Court. Excuse guys, where my mic is today. It's not the one in the lower district court or the 7th District Court for the being able to combine the rape cases and things of that nature, which needed to happen. This is something totally different. California is a different animal. We all know that. But let's get into this thing. So I wanted to first talk. I saw some articles out, and I wanted to ask, "What up, Traveler? What up, Chris? You guys, I think that Chris will have to let me know here, but I think there's a video dropping on some of what happened on the food platform. So while he's here, if there's a link to that, Chris, or if that drops at a certain time, is it on Rideshare Guy or your channel, or what channel is it on? Let's plug that thing. But if you have a link to it already, put it in the show notes. I'll watch it after this. But yeah, taxes on tips. So these articles are all, I don't know how many of you guys have looked into this. I've had a lot of, this is for the podcast. It's usually these days, it's kind of what are people asking me in emails? What are people wanting to know? And that's why, these are the audio podcast listeners for the most part. They email me and they ask me things, and I'm getting more and more and more on this taxes on tips. And I got to tell you guys, I spent over 2 decades, for those that don't know, actually 3 if you count all this rideshare and other things. I spent over 3 decades in the service industry, and a lot of it running and owning my own restaurants and bars. And I got to tell you that, first of all, I think it's going to be an extremely tough mountain to get it passed. And obviously, everybody in the service industry would love it if it was passed. I don't doubt that. I bet everybody that gets tips would love it. But there's a little clause here. And actually, for the taxes on tips to be able to pass, this would have to be addressed. And this is kind of a big issue because, as we all know, we are all labeled independent contractors in every app we work on. The good, the bad, the ugly, doesn't matter. We're independent contractors on it. And unfortunately, because even like if I own a restaurant and I have servers and I have waiters and I have bartenders and other staff, and kitchen gets paid a true minimum wage or plus, there is still a server. In every state, there's a server minimum wage that is not the same as your minimum wage. It's less because they know you're taking in tips, and then tips are held against it. But still, you are a W-2 employee. And because of that, those are the people who would get the tip advantage, not us. Gig app workers would not see it because, again, that's a whole nother obstacle. First of all, to get it passed, because I don't know that it can, but to get it passed, you're at least going to have to meet some people in the middle. You're not going to be able to say that this applies to 70 million independent contractors in this country, of which in this country 180 million people work. 70 million plus are independent contractors, self-employed owners, freelancers, whatever you want to call them. That's what they are. And they run their own businesses and whatnot. So the advantages there and the way that you could start twisting tips a little bit, that's a big concern of everybody's. So we can already say app-based work, we're not going to see it in the app-based work. You'll see it if you're a server or a bartender, but you're not going to see it in our apps and like all the tips that we get through DoorDash or whatever. That's not going to get passed along. The companies would love to see that. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, I mean, basically what's going on is that Uber and DoorDash primarily, but same type of people as the Flex Association in California back in when they were doing the Prop 22 to avoid AB5. So Uber and DoorDash lobbyists are trying to ensure their gig workers, and this is why it's like, again, here's the verbiage, who are independent contractors, and that's just totally on its own merit. And then it goes back to the sentence, and it's also qualify for a proposed exemption on tax tips. This is Uber and DoorDash saying, we're on the driver's side. We want you guys to get exempt from these tips. Well, yeah, no shit. It's like the only thing that you guys can ever do where there's no harm to you guys. And in fact, it probably helps with a lot of the accounting, even the passed through money. I don't know how it works with the tips you steal, right? Come on, DoorDash and Uber. That's funny. DoorDash, it's really not funny to you at all, getting caught in every state for a period of time and now working on a new period of time. But again, in your face, because you did it. You stole in every market for over 2 years. So, you got what you got coming to you. End of story. Currently the draft plan only includes traditional tipped employees like restaurants and casino workers. And there it is. That's kind of if you really do the digging, the real articles will get to that. So that is the argument. So to all of you asking me and saying, I don't know, I don't have a magic compass. Here's my opinion is that I don't think no taxes on tips will happen in this administration's term, even though you'd think this would be the administration it would work under or that would really push for this. They're going to be fighting enough uphill battles and lawsuits and things. They're going to have to really start picking these battles a little bit better. So bottom line is, I mean, I don't know if best case scenario gets passed, then great for those that will be affected. But I can pretty much guarantee you guys, unless I am missing something completely about what an independent contractor is, tips would count as payment and would actually not be exempt for an app-based gig worker who is not getting tipped while on the clock at a W-2 job, that tips are held against the pay rate in that state. And so, for example, here in Denver, 15 years ago anyway, a waitress or a waiter had to be paid $2.13 an hour as a W-2 employee of mine. A bartender had to be paid $3.15 an hour, even though the minimum wage was like 8, 9, 10. It didn't matter. That was server minimum wage. And then when they would enter their tips, that often would make it so if you worked like 80 hours, you could get a check potentially for $0, because if your tips outweigh what you make. But then me as the employer, I'm still showing that I do employ some people who are tip based. It's almost like a way to make it so that businesses like restaurants and whatnot don't try and just have a bunch of people who kind of come in and help and they pay off the books, because you could just say, I'm the only bartender there. Well, clearly it's probably not true, but they just want to make sure that people are on the books, and it helps in taxes and things like that. So we're not on the books like that. I wouldn't want to be with these companies. Neither of you, or Instacart, neither. None of you, actually. None of you. All right, let's go to this next tape. This next one's an easy no-brainer, but there was an interesting caveat I saw in this one. So Uber and Open Table, if you guys saw this, Open Table is an app where I can book to go out for the evening, and I can get a table at a restaurant of my choosing. And why not combined with Uber, right? I mean, other than the fact that Uber steals and kind of does some really gnarly stuff and just doesn't have an ethical compass at all. But I mean, if you're going to do this and you're in your open table, who struggles a little bit, if you're going to do this, yeah, do it with Uber, of course. Well, so the partnership makes sense, right? Because now you can arrange a ride. You can, and then through Uber Eats, which could eventually just take over Open Table, but you'd be running through Uber Eats for booking a table there instead. But you also might use the rideshare the side to go out that night. So you'd use the rideshare together. You can do it all through the app. Of course, it's encompassing whatever. I've seen these before. They always blow up. Like even you'd think, dude, make it look pretty and stuff, and they always just look horrible. They don't work. They're not functional. But the biggest thing that I did see here is that there's points like that. It expands their ecosystem. It will give a lot more strength to Uber One, which can now give you this also under that umbrella. For Open Table, obviously, this is the point is to enhance or drive up the numbers on who's using Open Table and going out to eat and doing it through the Uber app, which people are more familiar with and most likely have on their phone. Whereas even Open Table people, very few have it on their phone. Some do. But so obviously that adds the value. The problem always in these situations becomes, and for Uber investors watching that want to know if you're hearing me say this is a great idea, it is. It's just where are you gonna fuck over Open Table? Excuse my language. That's what you need to know as a Uber investor, because at no point is the intent of Uber not to screw over Open Table. Even if it's just test the waters. We've seen this with cities, free rides to polling or to vaccinations during the pandemic. We've seen all of you companies do this, and we know what you did. You made your inroads with governments and things like that. So to try out Open Table, I mean, immediately think what they get out of that is that immediately they get the Open Table database. And we all might be thinking, yeah, but they already have the database because they're Uber and they have way bigger, right? But now they have new data on these people. They will. And also, it's not just from grabbing it and running. They'll work at least up. We'll see this run for 3-6 months. And if it goes longer than that, Uber plans on buying Open Table, and maybe Open Table's okay with that. But to you investors, this is not a science that's good. This isn't a game changer. This should in no way want you to invest in Uber. You might want to see it now as something good, but I would challenge all the real investors out there too, to please look into things that we might not see that you might know. I'd love a comment down below from an investor that says what you're hearing in this, because maybe there's another damaging factor that we should know about. One thing for sure, and this one took some digging. There's a bunch of articles out on this, but there will be AI-driven recommendations for food based on past order history from Uber Eats. So there will absolutely be a merge of these. But the big question, so the most interesting thing that I found, and I love it when I find it in only a couple articles and not in all of them, but if I can find it in a couple or even 3 or whatever and know that, okay, this was a fact, it's just a fact some media didn't print. And it doesn't shock me. But there are deals being worked out, not with everybody on Open Table, but obviously places to work with Open Table will be getting more perks and more Uber Eats perks if they go exclusive with Uber Eats. So exclusivity is what 2025 is all about, y'all. Like fact. I mean, like we're going to start seeing, some have already done this, but it's basically going to be a fight between Uber and Lyft. That'll be an easy fight on the one side. And then Uber Eats and DoorDash. And you'd think DoorDash might have that win, but they've been losing their foothold. Uber Eats has a global foothold. So they'll put a lot into it, but it's going to be splitting up markets and splitting up vendors. Like instead of both covering everything, I know that, again, I know there's some exceptions, but instead of both covering everything, I think we're going to start to see a lot more, even of smaller locations, saddling up with one or the other. And I do know this from talking with other restaurant owners in Denver and whatnot, that the ease for a manager, I don't like giving anybody credit here, but I can say this: the ease for using DoorDash is easier and less frustrating for a restaurant manager than the Uber Eats side. I'm not on that side of it, but whatever comes through to the restaurants is a cleaner system with only one instance. It doesn't duplicate accidentally. It's in real time. I mean, they both are. I think this is just a problem they see on the other one, is that I have heard that DoorDash is the easier one, as in terms of it just, hey, it just prints it, we do this, and it's integrated, and boom, we send it. Uber Eats is the same thing, but like, I guess I've heard instances where things print 3 or 4 times. It just sounds like little hiccups, but it sounds like ones that they will need to fix. This all makes sense to me, but again, I just see it all as things are just, yeah, I'm still alive. Even Oscar, what's up? What's up, Deb? How you doing? It's just going to be all together. I mean, everything buys up everything. But it's been, since the pandemic, there have been some like smaller startups getting away for a little bit longer, but everything's going to start to get bought up again. And that's, that was something I wanted to talk to you about too, was that this exclusiveness for 2025 is totally what 2025 is going to be about. Trust me, it's not going to be about selling Mattress Firm on DoorDash. It's not going to be about selling whatever. Now furniture, remember summer furniture on DoorDash from Walmart? Yeah, I'm not going to bring you your outdoor furniture set in my car. That's not the future. And the delivery apps are struggling. Even adding shopping in is a struggle because the shopping themselves, I mean, I live here in a test market. I know that we started off with like 2 fleets. We now have like 6 or 7 fleets of these 26-foot refrigeration trucks from Kroger. Our Kroger out here is called City Market or King Supers in Colorado, but they're Kroger owned. And we've got the Kroger 26-foot refrigeration trucks. I see them go through my neighborhood all day. So they're literally, and you pay in-store prices, you get to use your points. You can do the curbside pickup for free, but if you want the same day service, which means within a 4-hour window of placing the order, as long as it's placed before 1 p.m. Mountain Time, it's $7. If you want to place your order and within 60 minutes of that order being placed, it's at your door. It's $5 the other way. It's $7. $7. So all it takes for every Instacart person in Colorado to do is wake up and go, there is absolutely no reason to use this app, because even Safeway does it as well here. So if you can just get the prices right from in the store, if you can make your orders, if somebody collects it all for you, puts it in a refrigeration truck, and within an hour you get it and it's $7, you're still saving on, like, let's call it 60 items with like 10 duplicates. And even if they're waters, they're going to come cold. The guy's not going to be upset. He's going to have a 2-wheeler to roll them up to your door. It's made for this, and it's cheaper. If the only reason you're not doing it, if you're still using Instacart here, is if you don't know. That's it. There's no advantage to the Instacart thing, I guess is what I'm saying. Yeah, that's all right, even Oscar. This is the actual podcast that I drop every Tuesday, and I'm going to start doing this for those of you that aren't channel members. This one will stay public, and I'm testing something with the recording right now. So if for any reason the video is a little off, it should be crisp once it processes, but we'll see how it does. Yeah, this is going to be the channel members starting next week. I'm going to do it on Mondays when I have CEOs, my guest, whoever. The 1-hour Rodeo Rideshare Rodeo audio podcast. Again, this is episode 447. Been doing this since the first week of May in 2020. So coming up on 5 years, and getting not too far off from 500 episodes, really. Kind of a huge milestone. So But this is going to start being on the YouTube member side as well as doing it live in the Podbean studio. So if you guys listen on any pod player, obviously most of the listens come from Spotify or Apple Music or whatnot. But if you are listening to the audio podcast on an audio podcast player, any of them around the world, you can go to the Podbean, download that software for free, listen there, and you will be able to catch it live just like I'm doing it here. So that said, what's up, Brenda? What's up, David? And thank you, Chris. I hope that's the actual link to the video. That link, guys, let's see, this link right here, and audio podcast listeners, I will put it in there too. I have not seen it yet, but I'm in it. So it's about people using the platform who are not supposed to be using the platform. So I haven't seen it yet. You guys will have to check it out for yourselves. So this bill in Nevada, guys, wow. So I don't know if you guys heard, there's two big losses for Uber lately that they used to get away with left and right. And I'm going to make sure that I hit on, we'll just talk about the one in California a little briefer, because I want to focus on this other one right next door in Nevada. But we'll get to the California one in a second. So, and all of you should know this. The one in California is based for all gig. If you did gig work from 2016 to the pandemic, you might want to stick around and hear that, because that is it's DoorDash. It's everything. It's everything that fell under Prop 22. But I don't know if you guys remember me talking about last year, the Nevada was pushing a lot. Nevada carries, as of last year, Nevada carried $1.5 million of insurance on rideshare drivers. And I believe on the Uber Eats side too. I think DoorDash did the same. I think everybody that was operating there was having 1.5 million of comprehensive insurance for the drivers. Now, this is more than most states. 48 states in the United States. 47. 47 states before Nevada. 47 states had $1 million of coverage on Lyft, Uber, Instacart, DoorDash, whatever. That's where the coverage is. And the coverage is very confusing. Don't get me wrong. Kim put out a video, Kim's Side Money Plans. I'm going to give her a shout out, you guys. If you're listening on the audio podcast, you have to check her out on YouTube, because she no longer does her audio podcast. But Kim was talking about, I saw a video where she was kind of getting into this stuff a little bit too, about like how much do we really think DoorDash has paid out ever? And I had to say to her that, listen, like, DoorDash, I don't think they ever paid out much at all. Do you know what I'm saying? Because I would be very interested in that number. I know it's not a number that's probably super easy to come by, but there's got to be a way to at least, I don't know. There's got to be a way to at least like Google it and get some kind of number. But I'll have to look into it more. But I don't think they have paid out a lot of money. Basically, think of it this way. If you do Instacart or you do DoorDash, maybe somebody in here, maybe this applies to you, so leave a comment if it does. Have you ever been in an accident, not rideshare, while doing a delivery platform or like food delivery or grocery delivery or Walmart, Spark, or any of those? Have you been in an accident, and how was it dealt with? By your insurance, by the insurance of the app that you're working under? Because in rideshare, it often plays hand in hand. Like they are going to have to get involved in claims. With the food side, from what I know from most people, it's almost like, hey, man, if you did something weird or outside the box or that involved our brand name, that's why we have the million. Otherwise, it's kind of on you, the independent contractor. So it's always on you anyway. So don't ever think that these numbers are great, because if you killed somebody, they're going to be suing you for way more than $1.5 million. In Nevada, that's how much it was. So this was an unrelative bill last year. It was a bill that that basically they So okay, here let me get right to it here. This is what happened in Nevada last year was that Uber and trial lawyers were spending millions of dollars on political donations, ads, and legal fights to fight each other because Uber backed a ballot initiative that aimed to cap attorney fees in civil cases at 20%. Okay, so which was strongly, obviously, opposed by all lawyers involved, right? Everybody except for the Uber team obviously opposed. And here's why. Because most places that are going to take a case like this, let's say that the average, it's not just about how much the average person has, like me, you, or whatever that might be out doing any of these apps. But if something happened and you were in an accident, first of all, there's a quick shout out, just freebie, legalrideshareguys.com, put it in your phone. I've known those guys for a long time. They're a good first conversation, even if they just lead you somewhere else. But so here's the thing. If so if you kill somebody and accidentally while you're doing this app and you're like, sweet, Uber's got that $1 million umbrella, you're going to be sued for 10 million. So if Uber does get involved and were to do a full payout, it would be for 1 million, leaving you on the hook for 9. Again, a gig worker in most cases is not in a place to be in one of those conditions, but a lot of independent contractors face that same thing. So again, when you treat it like your business, you will do great. When you treat it like, I'm getting orders on an app, don't ever get into that mindset where you think they got me covered, because they don't. But so they wanted to say that if you sued Uber for $100,000 or $1 million and you won, that the most the lawyer could take would be 200,000. Now, that might sound to you like, well, that's a good day for the lawyer. Well, that's a whole case, and it is a good day for the lawyer, absolutely. But a lot of these lawyers are going to be using all of their time up front for free. In most cases, gig workers don't even have a $500 amount to put down. That's why I say legal rideshare. They don't need any money from you. If they take it, it's completely because they think they can win the case and that you have a case. In that trade-off, you don't have $1 million to go hire an attorney, but instead of them just taking 20%, they're going to have to take 40% if they win, which also makes them go for a larger amount. When it's due, it's due. So almost every gig worker I know wouldn't even have the opportunity to be able to put 50 or 70 grand up to hire a personal attorney to take on these companies. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe 1% of all gig workers, but that's a very small percentage. I don't even think 1. But the other ones that would be best off shopping around for lawyers that can do these contingency type things. But the initiative that they were trying to kick down the road and really thinking it would pass at 20% cut was basically knocked down completely across the board, almost unanimously in their court last year, because and basically the biggest piece of information that came out of it from the Supreme Court ruling was that, quote unquote, it had the most confusing summary. So this is them talking about the Uber-based ballot initiative, and they're saying, dude, they couldn't even explain to us who are Supreme Court judges. They couldn't explain it to us in a way we understood. You're supposed to be doing it at like a 5th grade level, which is what like the average newspaper is for reading level, is a 5th grade level. So you would think everything would be at least done on a 5th grade level. They're basically saying this one wasn't. They're saying like, dude, nothing makes sense here. But here's what happened. So Uber was basically kicked some. This is why I'm pretty damn sure. Sorry, Nevada, but I got to be honest. Every state is in bed with Uber to a degree, and I'm not just picking on you, Nevada. I mean, if somebody from Nevada sitting there going, yeah, I mean, yeah, we're in bed with them a little, but not as bad as other states. I mean, it's true though, and it's kind of, this is proof of it to me. There's 100 of these type moments, but this is kind of where the proof meets. This is where the rubber meets the road, right? Because you hear about this and it's a win, which is very rare. No, if people want to hire attorneys and the attorneys charge 40%, that's cool. They can go do that. Great. That's a huge win for the drivers. But now Nevada trial lawyers, the same one who fought this tooth and nail, and Uber have agreed on a deal after everything that happened last year and Uber losing. So the new bill introduced by the new bill introduced basically by Uber was some kick from the same people who fought them on the other bill. Pull it together, people. This is the kind of crap that drives me insane. AB 523 Nevada passed unanimously in Assembly Committee and Growth on Infrastructure. Rideshare companies not liable for drivers' actions if they provide at least 1 million in coverage. So what happened? Basically, Nevada said, dude, we couldn't give you that 20% lawyer thing. Come on. Like you guys got the worst PR. Like everybody knows you're kind of shady as fuck. Like we gotta watch our state a little bit, guys. And and then they come back around the other side though and say, you know what we can do though? We can reduce your insurance coverage umbrella to 1 million on each driver instead of 1.5, since all the other states do it. Almost like we can almost slip this one right through because all the other states in the continental US, all the other 48, all have now with this one, all 48 have the same 1 million. So I mean, I understand they were the only state that was higher, but they didn't bring it down at a time that just they recognized it in the books. So there must have been a reason. You wouldn't just overlook something like that. I'm not sure what it is. It might have to do with gambling commissions and things like that. And I'm not saying everything is gangster. If you audio people can see me now, because it is all gangster. But I mean, when you move into like one of my dearest friends growing up, maybe one day he'll jump on the podcast because we're still the closest of friends. He's been a magistrate, he's been a lawyer, he's been a judge in Las Vegas and in Reno. He dealt with child cases as a magistrate, and now he works for they're up in Reno, and he works for the Nevada Water Commission, and he's a judge on the Water Commission. You might, in every other state, we would be like, that's the most boring job I've ever heard of. But in Nevada, anything with Water Commission on it means you're being paid at the top of whatever you do. So to be a lawyer, for him, a judge, you're being paid at the top of the top because that's some of the scum is there, And I mean, just the Water Commission still has to be run. So my friend's a good guy. But the problem is that the Water Commission, just like the Gaming Commission and other things, they have their hands in everything. It's almost like a illegal union is how I always see it. But I know they would very much not like that description. So hey, Miko, and hey, Deb, it's looking like both you guys were talking about accidents here. Let me see if when we get to the end here, I can run through that real quick. So here's the other part of the agreement I hate. So they take the 1.5 million in Nevada, they move it down to the 1 million, right? And at the 1 million, now both sides, and guys, this might not seem like the biggest thing to you, but it is given the term. So both sides agree to avoiding pursuing bills or ballot resolutions against each other for 6 years. You can't make this stuff up. They just because of that other thing, because of the being able to hire a lawyer, which is you're given right anyway as an independent contractor, they remove a third of your coverage, insurance coverage, and they sign a deal with the same people that said they helped you by allowing you to hire a lawyer, balance out their backers, because now they can tell all of their constituents, that, well, listen, the deal that did come out, if they are against such a thing, that, the fact that why'd you agree to that? That's going to allow a corporation to get sued. Well, it should. If it should get sued, it should get sued. But you can't say that always. So now the win that they get to go back with to their constituents is they get to say, but for the next 6 years, you can't touch it. You can't do anything. So I don't know. To me, 6 years is like a life sentence. When we look at how fast things are going and stuff, to lock away 6 years for Nevada to get into some laws, really? Um, so here's uh, uh, oh, and it all, by the way, it all goes into effect October 1st, 2025. So get your lawsuits in Nevada if you got them. So I'm going to try and run through this as quick as I can, then get over to you guys a little bit, maybe. But Uber. Why is Uber in settlement negotiations in California right now? I can tell you this: it's different than from the rape cases that are being heard in the Seventh Court that are allowing victims of sexual assault to be able to collaborate their lawsuits. Because, and if you're wondering what's the win here, because if you're thinking, well, isn't that one of those like where a ton of people get paid out and it becomes lesser pay? Not really. It allows the judges to hear the case with a lot of witnesses, which can establish precedent and which can then just make it be one of those things that Uber just pays off in the amount they should. Now, here it's still being pushed to the point where they're saying, no, let's go to court. That's a different case. Okay. But that one looks like, as of now, I'm sure it'll be challenged, but as of now, that did pass. It did ratify. It did pass the seventh house or the seventh court. And it did become that they can all pool now and do this. So that was a win, if you call that a win. But they are also in settlement negotiations. Does anybody even know what they're in settlement negotiations for? Is anybody here from California? Because the reason that they're in settlement negotiations is, I got to do it quick. It'll be quick and painless, guys. In January 1st of 2020, 4 months before the pandemic happened, we didn't really know any of this. January 1st, a law, AB5, went into effect in California. That law put all independent contractors, self-employed, freelancers, and all different things, unless you had a specific carve out, which only a handful did, it puts you all out of work and you were not able to work for yourself. This is 3 months before the pandemic. I have had many people on the podcast who have been directly affected by AB5. So if you're not sure and you're like, no, I don't think that really happened, ask me. I can point you to any videos. You will be heartbroken by the time you hear them. It's amazing the damage it did. It was a net AB5 to originally get gig workers. They thought because the bill AB5 says you cannot run your own business and pay other independent contractors. It was saying everybody that does anything for you needs to be an employee. And that puts so many places out of work. I mean, like we had a nonprofit. My friend Gail Gordon runs a nonprofit opera house in Santa Barbara, and she couldn't do the nonprofits because sometimes they would be like 4-day shows 2-3 times a year at this opera house, and she couldn't do the shows because she had to hire in cast for 3 or 4 days at a time and pay them production pay like I would get working for the laser company. So this is how businesses have operated forever. But even a 401 or 501c3, a true nonprofit, still got a fine for this, and the fines are like $20,000 for putting on one show. Now Gail's a tough cookie. I got a couple interviews with her. Glad to share them. Older podcasts, but all these people went out and under, and really the intent was to get the whatever they had it estimated at in late 2019, which was around 13 to 15 million app-based gig workers. So the net was supposed to be cast onto them. Unfortunately, they said, let's go after all 35. Again, they didn't know about the pandemic coming, but they enforced the law and they kept the law enforced even when the pandemic hit. One of the stupidest moves I've ever seen any state do, even after that law was enacted, and it was enacted behind closed doors. It did involve Lorena Gonzalez. It did involve Mr. Gavin Newsom. It did involve some Professor Vina Dubal, from she's a law professor at UC Hastings. I've had her on the podcast. I've had these people on the podcast, not Gavin Newsom, but I've had the other players on both sides. And that really was a career ender for everybody. They did not keep it to the gig apps. The problem is that on January 1st, the gig apps needed to comply with AB5, meaning everybody on the app had to be a W-2 employee, or the only other option that they would have had was, let's take the rideshare, for instance, but it was going to apply to every gig app. But they would have had to sell off, I guess it doesn't matter, DoorDash or Uber would have had to sell off franchises, a certain amount in each city or each zoned area of a certain amount of people. And then other people would buy those, like a McDonald's or something, and they would have to keep their staff staffed. But that would mean schedules and all this other stuff. It basically became employee model, and there's no way around it, and tough. And all through January of 2020, Uber, Lyft, they formed a thing called the Flex Association. And they spent $209 million to get Prop 22 on the November 2020 ballot. Now, remember, November is 11 months out from January. And also from January, 4 months in, we had a pandemic that hit the world. So they don't know that yet, but at the same time, they're trying to get on the 2021 or 2020 ballot to say, no, we need a vote on this Prop 22 that we would provide 120% of your active time in a minimum wage, or 120% of minimum wage in your area, which in California varies from $16 to $19 an hour. And so you would get 120% of that if you lived in wherever you live, whatever that was, but you'd only get it for the active hour. There were lots of flaws, but they also were going to give you health stipend. Well, the health stipend ended up being nothing more than just straight up like marketplace, or what many still refer to as Obamacare. But the health stipend didn't do anything. It was basically like, I mean, nowadays I've had people from California. This probably wasn't the case when it first launched, because, even with the dumbest things, honeymoon period. But I do know people that were trying it for a minute, but now they're going to Marketplace. They still live in California, and they're finding the better deals on Marketplace. They'll go find the same thing in the Uber medical when it's like the end of the year and you're applying for the next year. And it's like $30 more than they can just pay on this side for themselves. Basically, Uber puts it in an Uber box with a bow on it and says, we're going to charge $30 a month on top of the deal you just found. Well, no, you don't need that. That's not helpful. But there were a couple other perks or this or that, but really nothing played out. The real thing was the 120%. There was some multi-apping going on for a while where people could overlap and be like on Grubhub. They could be on Uber, then turn off Uber, turn on DoorDash. And if maybe over a 3-hour period, they had like 6 active hours. I mean, that's a little overkill. But in 4 hours, they had 6 active hours. Because if you think about it, and there's Bud Soda. He doesn't, or he used to all the time. He's dirty stacking apping all the time, right? You might have 3 deliveries going with 3 different platforms. Well, in California, you'd be being paid the 120% of active time on all of those. So there was some hairiness there. But when they at the end of January, when California said, okay, we need to collect on this, pay us the AB5, or you have to either make them all employees by, it had to be like it was midnight on January 31st, 2000. And as of February 1st, minute 1, they'd be they would be not compliant in California to operate without having employees. Uber and Lyft and DoorDash and all the others had done nothing. They had done nothing to prepare for this. Nothing. They literally were like, no, we're not going to do it. We kind of all knew the play. We didn't hear anything. But really what happened is when the 31st came, it was like in the midnight hours, because there was communication between Newsom's administration and the Flex Association, which was all the apps. And they were saying, well, what are you going to do? And Uber and Lyft were the big ones, even Lyft at the time, because it was, well, we're going to stop all of our apps won't operate in the state of California anymore. Forget the food perk for a minute, which again, we're still pre-pandemic. So it's not even big. It's bigger in California, but probably in California at that time, the biggest was Postmates. So just to take you back down memory lane a little bit. But so on the 31st, they just said, no, we won't pay it. We are going to shut operations down. It literally came into that like last 5 to 10 minutes. And I'm not kidding. The deal was made in like, I want to say the last 5, but it's been a while. So I'll just be careful and say the last 5 to 10. So like 11:50 p.m., Pacific time to midnight. That's when that deal was signed to allow Uber to operate and to allow DoorDash to operate as they had been in the state of California. Now, pay attention to this part. As they had been in the state of California until November, when they would be on the ballot and people would have the chance to vote on it. And everybody in the state of California would have a chance to vote on this. Do you want to see Uber and Lyft get basically the way that they were playing it, get unionized, and that immediately tells everybody, oh, more rates? No, I mean, I don't do that platform, but I don't want to pay more than I have to. Or do you want to allow them to be contract workers that will get these benefits and they outplayed everything? They oddly, you'd think in the one state that could shoot something like that down be California. Oddly, it passed by 60%, which was like, it's like when you do 60% of California voters as compared to 40, the difference is like 3.5 million voters. So oddly, which is rare for California, Prop 22, when November came around, they won. And, the gig apps, the Flex Association, DoorDash, Instacart, Prop 22 went in place. It was still a win to them because they didn't have to make everybody employees. So of course it's a win, because otherwise they were leaving the state. But now this is where the really craziness comes in. So now there's a lawsuit that is regarding pre-Prop 22 and 2020 January to November 2020 on voting day, when Prop 22 was overwhelmingly voted in, meaning that no, they wouldn't be subject to the AB5 law. Now, here is the new lawsuit, and there's in settlement negotiations, which blows my mind because you still were never labeled employees. But so the lawsuit is saying that pre-Prop 22, that there's a lot of money owed to the drivers, a lot. And they're basically saying that that wage, and they're calling it wage theft like they always do, that this wage theft needs to be addressed. It needs to be repurposed to these drivers. So basically, the lawsuit's a big deal for gig workers' rights in California. It essentially is trying to hold Uber and Lyft accountable for how they classified and paid drivers pre-Prop 22. If successful, it could mean billions in back pay and damages for drivers who worked 2016 to January of 2020, and then January of 2020 to November of 2020 when the vote went into play. So they are doing it in the 2 parts. I don't know why it's not just one part, but that you're going to be owed billions. This is just California, because they're saying that, well, yeah, they were supposed to pay the AB5 money. And then it was like, well, you're going to vote on Prop 22 in November. We, the state, are giving them the patch. That would have had to have happened. Otherwise, they would have tried to collect all those taxes and fines that they were owed for not having W-2 employees. So they were going along with that, the state, obviously and clearly, because they let all of these operate, and they let them do it under this, Prop 22, and they have since. But so the rallies show that the drivers and the labor advocates don't want the states and cities to cut an easy deal with these companies. And I know this is California, and this is a big protest state. I think we had a little piece on somebody I've had on this podcast before. I'll let you guys find her name if you want. She's big with the United Drivers Advocates. I guess I'll just tell you her name. Her name is Nicole Moore. Nicole is the spearhead of a lot of the movements out there in California. She is also a professional protester. And if you guys are not familiar with that, I mean, if you're like in your head kind of going, well, I can imagine what it is, but if you're not really familiar with what some of those people make, maybe, I don't know, maybe the last live we did, We talked about it a little. I don't know. Go find it. I don't want to hit on that again though. But I mean, basically, I've had her on the podcast too, and she is a professional. I mean, she didn't say that. She would never say that. But she was like working all the things during AB5, and she's been involved in a lot. She's a professional at this, and she gets paid way more than anybody would think to do this work. She's basically up there with the same that a legal lobbyist would make. And I'm talking about one that graduated business law and works for one of these apps. She makes about the same as they do. So, but yeah, so they're saying that between the 2016 and 2020 plus to the vote, that they didn't have their worker protections and driver rights, like minimum pay and unfair deactivations. And this is my thing. Look, guys, I'm for the drivers. Of course I'm for the drivers. But I just feel like, man, you guys made this deal. Prop 22. You guys were the guinea pig. You guys were the first to try it. The timing was weird with a global pandemic and stay-at-home orders. And there was a lot of timing that was weird with that, but nonetheless, you guys decided, and you didn't just decide. What was decided amongst three people. The voice of the drafters of AB5, which Vina Dubal was the law professor at UC Hastings, who's been on this podcast as well. And she was the drafter with about 70 other people, but she was the forefront spokesperson along with Lorena Gonzalez, who's a huge union person, and then Gavin Newsom. They kind of behind closed doors made AB5 happen in like August of 2019. And really, that's what, if you've ever seen Kim Cavan or Karen Anderson on this podcast, you've seen them say like, the few people that knew about AB5 were even like, what? That can't be right. But for the most part, like 95% of independent contractors, business owners, whatnot, were not even aware of AB5 until January 1st hit. And there were groups everywhere saying, dude, you can't operate anymore. They were getting letters, emails. Hey, everybody that works for you has to be an employee, has to be W-2, it has to be on the books. No more freelancing out. You can't, if you were a writer in California, you became toxic overnight because at first it was like 10 articles. I think Kim or Karen last told me it's like 25 per publication, because that's after years of fighting this though, but it was 10 originally. And there were 10 articles that you could write for, like, let's say that you were writing for the Chicago Tribune. Well, the Chicago Tribune is owned by the same people that own the Miami Herald and the same people that own the Boston Globe. So if you write 10 articles for the Chicago Tribune and then the Miami Herald and the Boston Globe ask you to write an article, you can't, because you wrote 10 already for that year for that company that represents all of them. So they're pushing for settlements that include strong wage protections and drivers' rights, blah, blah, blah. And I'm not trying to be mean with the blah, blah, blah. It's so interesting to me that the drivers at first, even the United drivers, like when I interviewed Nicole and when I interviewed Vina Dubal, it was still pre-pandemic at my audio podcast. Okay. Or wait, what? No, maybe not. But it was very much how at first, for the first year or two, they were fine with Prop 22. Vina, not as much. I remember she's a law professor, but Nicole, the big fighter, she played it as a win. Now, of course, a professional protester, I'll just call her a protester here forward, but as a protester, of course, she's going to hail that as a win, even if there were some losses along the way. But all of a sudden, within a couple of years of it just failing across the board, like we've been talking about it nauseum, but it needs to be, because otherwise the only thing being seen is this bullshit side that people try and present, and Uber and Lyft getting their fake PR, and it's government fake PR. These stories are crazy. And but so they liked it, then they didn't like it, and then if you guys you might remember this, even if you don't live in California, last year, because of Prop 22, they tried to strike. Oh my God, you guys, listen, there were two things that the apps gained when your state voted on Prop 22. The only two things that they gained were you were to remain an independent contractor and be exempt from the AB5 clause. That's it. Now they had to give out all this active time pay, and there was some overlap and this, that, the other. And I'm not saying that they did more than they obviously did the bare minimum. But the other thing was that, and this was the big one. I mean, they both were, but you had to stay an independent contractor, and everything would remain that way, and you would never have to be under an employee AB5 or AB5 type law. The other thing was that that you could not gather to protest. So you couldn't protest the company because you're not a W-2 employee. Makes sense? I mean, it makes sense to me. It's what you agreed to. And I, as an independent contractor outside of the gig apps doing production, lasers, lighting, other things, I can say that, there's a difference between the two, but since the government's not going to clear that up, it would be, I always refer to state independent contractor law. It would be wise for you guys to know your state independent contractor law. Because they are all pretty much the same, but it would be wise for you guys to know it, because that is what the apps are going to fight for the most. They don't care about the other things. Are losses, and they're dealable losses. But the thing they're going to fight for the most is that. That is what makes or breaks every one of these platforms. They don't work under any circumstances if it's an employee model. In fact, guys, I hate to even say this, but it would if employment law were forced on Uber in every country in the world tomorrow, and it was enforceable tomorrow, April 2025. If it was everywhere in the globe, everybody had to be an employee. I don't think, because of the amount of money they'd have to raise customer prices, because of the amount of money they'd have to pay drivers, that floor meets ceiling, figuring in all the bull crap to come up with these low budget numbers. I don't think, hell, maybe even Uber, I don't think it can make it to the end of this calendar year. So clearly the biggest threat to every one of these companies is having to classify you as a worker or acknowledge you as such. So, yeah, I just find it really funny that they get Prop 22. They AB5 hits them behind closed doors. They allow a vote. And in California, I didn't expect the vote to go the way of the corporations. But yet 60% of the people voted to let these apps continue operating as independent contractors, because for the most part, 60% of the people probably voting were like, dude, I use these apps. I'm not going to pay more. That means yes on 22. I remember I have a friend in Mill Valley who he runs his own computer tech service, and he does a lot of installations on high-end homes, smart home installations and things of that nature. And I remember he's a very smart guy, but I remember him calling me and going, I know you talk about this all the time, but what's that Prop 22 thing again? Which way do I vote on this? I said, yes. Oh, man. Well, I don't think that, so there's a question up to the audio podcast listeners. There's a question up here from Bud Soda. You guys check out Bud Soda Stories on YouTube. You can just go to YouTube and just put at Bud Soda Stories, one word. You should find his channel. He's an interesting guy. He's got some good political views when he gets into that kind of thing. And I know a lot of you audio podcast listeners like that kind of thing. But he's saying that why do they keep trying to make us employees drives me nuts. Who's they? Are you talking about like Drivers United? Because Drivers United is always going to do that. That's why I'm saying Drivers United said Prop 22 was a win for 2 years. Then when it became, wait a minute, I can get the same, my medical stipend gets me the same amount of medical coverage, the same exact plan for cheaper on the marketplace. If I can go to marketplace and get my insurance, how is it a bonus to have this stipend? And it was literally, there was no other answer other than, guys, I mean, Uber does put a nice bow on it, right? For that extra 300 or 100 a month that they charge you. Because the problem is like, yeah, Uber was saying with stipend, you can get this plan for $230, but you can go to Marketplace and get that for like $160, and not just something comparable, the exact same plan, same company, same plan. So if you can get it cheaper on Marketplace, why are you going to do it on Uber? Because that, even if you're only using the stipend if it helps you. So they wanted to protest that, and they wanted to say that our stipend should not have to be used towards medical so that we can buy medical ourselves. And this was last year. They said, so we're going to strike. And I was thinking, you can't strike. You're not employees. I mean, you can have movements. Look at Rideshare Professor Torsten. If you guys want to know about any of those, he's always rallying up a bunch, and those numbers grow. But but the fact still remains, we are not employees. I would never be an employee of this company, of any of these companies. But the fact that I have an option to earn on my time and using the apps I want in my market, well, that's a different story. That's something that I can play ball with, because being an independent contractor, and I think that this is where I want to end this today, because being an independent contractor, if you've ever been one before the gig economy, you know that it comes with a lot of trials and tribulations. Now, starting up a little retail business, look, we can even go to pre-Amazon for those that remember those days. Even if you were going to start up a retail pre-Amazon, you better have you got to be willing to not make any money for years. You got to be willing to not eat one meal a day and live like crap to make your business work. Some people get lucky out of the gate and they make a ton of money. Most of the time when that happens, they get the millionaire syndrome and they end up spending it, and then hard times hit and they go out of business anyway. Most businesses fail in the first 3 years, and actually about 70% of those businesses fail in the first year. So I know that I can't remember if it's 2 or 3 years, but you're supposed to tell yourself, don't expect to take pay for. That's why when I owned a bar, I owned 10% of a bar, and I was in it with a bar group that bought bars around the country, well, in 3 states. And I worked for them for many years in Michigan. And because of that, they invested the 90%. I got 10 as the manager, and I sweat equitied it for years, for like over a 4-year period. I took a hit on my pay, and I earned my 10%. So that's different. That has investor backing. But if you go start a business, that's on you. And most of us couldn't even do that. So the fact we have these is great. But that line of where they learn, I've said it enough times, but I'm going to say it here again, because I know a lot of people have used it. I don't even know what the reality is of it being around anymore, but EBT. I confirmed with somebody, and if you guys know, if you know, I am talking with somebody on a semi-regular basis who is giving me lots of good things, some that I can say, some that I can digest. And I've said what I can say, and we've hit a couple of things before they happen. So it's been pretty amazing. But these apps are really, all of them, obviously, whether you work one day for 2 hours or 1 hour, or you work 60 hours across 8 apps, they're learning all of our rhythms. Clearly the algorithm issues are huge. There's even hiccups they have that we know about. But when Para got sued, DoorDash has had 2 times as many coders trying to stop transparency from leaving the app as they did people coding the app itself. And they had a lot of coders. So that's, because there was an app, Para, that grew up to 250,000 active users at its highest point. They kept kind of letting it go, even at some big numbers in the late 2021 in the first launch. And that's when those numbers grew. And then I think when they saw 250,000 active, maybe not all at the same time, but somehow entering that and seeing that there was access, that's when all this division started. And on the second cease and desist, David fought him, at least just to learn the number of some numbers. We didn't win anything, but we learned some numbers. And this is where this person came from that's been somewhat helping us out. But look, the EBT for DoorDash, I always had a lot of thoughts on this, but it was, if you guys don't know, EBT was put into the app um, just to learn what the lowest amount of pay hourly, like true hourly. I know that it should be true hourly too, but I know that when, again, they love having to make me dissect this or somebody dissect these words because it gets tricky. So there's dash time and active time when really there should just be real time. Now the dash time or the active time is how much you were on an order or an offer, and the dash time is how much time you had the app on. But you shouldn't have those two to confuse you. But no matter how much you're on it, EBT, if it was being offered, if you saw in the very beginning, if you were around when EBT launched in your area, you might have seen it fluctuate a little bit. But my guess is any of you over the past probably, I would say 9 months to a year, my guess is if you, unless you got EBT like 9 months ago and then some funky things like a couple markets might have, but if you had EBT before that, in the last 6 to 9 months, my guess is that EBT number has not changed at all. Like I know for a fact for the last year and a half in Austin, it is $11. Whenever I would go to the para office, it's $11. I'd land, I would try and dash, and it would be available. In my market, I see it, but it always has the padlock. But we'll get to that. But so every time, and I was able to do it. I didn't do it, of course. But I could have dashed earned by time for $11. What are they doing? They're learning what you're going to work for in your car. And that's all a model to be used against you. I mean, at the same time, understand this company has the data and has the technology. I can't believe I just gave anybody that credit, but they do. They can use the same databases they have on us to, like, instead of having an acceptance rate, because I know a lot of you, like, first of all, that's illegal too through an independent contractor, but the acceptance rate is highly illegal. It's a big ethical boundary that they should not be touching. And here's the craziest part is, I know the volume for DoorDash is down nationwide. Fact. That can't be disputed. Anybody that wants to dispute their earnings, we can talk about that because that's done through other things and raising prices and other things and subsidies and whatnot. But they are losing volume big. And so, man, I'm going to go down a whole rabbit hole here. I don't think I can. Because this DoorDash thing was actually what I was going to do 13 on this coming week. And that would mean you audio podcast listeners won't catch it because I tried 13 with you and you guys decided that, I mean, you know, it wasn't like I got hate mail or anything bad, but nobody was watching it. I don't know if it was because it was only 13 minutes. I feel like my audio podcast listeners, like you guys, you all in audio world, you probably know, at least I know many of you have been over to YouTube and have decided it's just not for you. You don't like I don't know, for whatever reason, you prefer the audio podcast, and I get that, but it's kind of opposite. So like YouTube can enjoy the long form lives too, or podcasts, but that's really all that's liked by the audio podcast world. But just so you know, I mean, for like 9-10 weeks, I did try and put 13 out. So if you want to know where I'm going to take this whole DoorDash story, because it will be this week's 13. And by the way, this week's 13 is the 3-year anniversary of 13. So you guys, here's what's happened before I get out of here, or before I check, make sure you say what up to you guys if I can. But so here's what's happened in the past little bit. UberLiftDrivers.com just had its 8-year anniversary. That's my website since March of 2017. So in March this year was 8 years of UberLiftDrivers.com. That is all the gig news you guys would need posted daily. So check it out. And then, and I take a lot of the ads out and stuff. And then sometimes I'll link to a full article if I'm just aggregating news, or, you know, there's original posts, things like that. So check them out. But then in 2 weeks later in March, we had the Roundtable 3-year anniversary. All right. And now this week is the 3-year anniversary of 13. But the first week in May is the 5-year anniversary of the Rideshare Rodeo audio podcast. So I expect everybody to be there for that one. That's going to be a big one. Yeah, but if you guys want to check out Bud Soda live, it's every Tuesday. This is for you audio podcast listeners. So it's at Bud Soda Stories on YouTube, and it's every Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. He does it with Joe from the Driven Wild, Wild spelled W-Y-L-D. We've had Joe on the podcast, I believe, before, at least the Roundtable. Same with Bud Soda. But those two guys get together and kind of talk about different topics each week. And they're definitely talking to the chat too. So check them out. Bud Soda Stories. And for those of you who do go over to YouTube, I know a lot of audio people do too. So, but yeah, guys, thank you for joining me. Like I said, I'm going to start doing this as a members thing on Monday. And I'm not sure what I think is going to happen is I'll cut it up into because it's always 3 to 5 stories is what I try to get through. So what I'll do is all those stories will be released on YouTube to the public throughout the week, but the members can watch it on Monday being recorded live. Same with the Podbean listeners, which is a free app. If you guys want to download the audio Podbean and subscribe to ridesharerodeo.com or Rideshare Rodeo on there, please do it. Because I'm about to be doing some blowing up on there. And here's why, because on the audio podcast side, guys, so some of it won't even be workable on YouTube sometimes, but there's no filter. I can do what I want. I can say what I want. So not that I'm holding back too much, but it's a different setting. It's a different platform. It's a different way. Thank you all for joining me. Hope everybody had a great weekend, and look out for some big changes that are coming for this channel and for some content over on TikTok as well. Going to be doing this live streamed on TikTok as well. I know many of you are not on TikTok. However, there are a lot over on TikTok too. So, but yeah, it's going to be within the next several weeks. It will be live streamed to the members on here, occasionally on TikTok. And the reason for that is because TikTok allows everything. What I'm hoping is if it's on the members side, nothing won't be an issue, but I need to ask some YouTube people I know about that. But if that's the case, it'll be live on Podbean. It'll be live on YouTube. It'll be live on TikTok, and members only here because I don't want to get any strikes on the channel. I don't know, but when I go back to my podcast voice, it's a little different than this. I can get pretty heated. Things can go off, but yeah, we're going to do it anyway. So, and there's a couple other things I got coming up. I think you guys are going to really dig, including Beyond the Algorithm Season 2. You guys like the Doordash thing on Saturday, you're just going to have to wait to find out what that is. Thank you for joining me. You guys have a great, awesome week, and we will see you back here next week or Thursday on Roundtable, if not before. And you guys take care. Be safe out there. Peace. She was just a baby.